Common YouTube advice tells you that opening your video with a provocative statement helps lock in viewership. As such, I shall give you the thesis of this here video. Dublin did nothing wrong. War crimes, execution of civilians, acts of domestic terrorism, all misinformation fed to you by Big Victoria to discredit this noble organisation. Dublin is the extremely subtly named group of Terran freedom fighters battling for the freedom of the wonderful nation of Tara. Referring to Dublin as Arknights' freedom fighters instead of Arknights' IRA is 100% so that YouTube doesn't decide that I am promoting terrorism or some shit. Which is too bad, because if you wanted a nuanced opinion and analysis of this wonderful organisation named after the second best city in Ireland, you have come to the wrong place. For reference, the wonderful city of Cork clears Dublin. So let's hop straight into this unapologetic propaganda. Before Victoria rose to power, there was a wonderful and beautiful nation. Its people lived in harmony. To the south of Victoria was the land that would become Tara, and for the most part was sparsely populated. The people here led simple lives. They helped their neighbours and stood together in times of crisis. Then, the dragons of Victoria rose to power. These dragons sought to create a system inspired by the rulers of Sargon. As such, those who wished to retain their original way of life would venture south to these lands and form the nation of Tara. Free from the rule of the Victorian dragons, the people continued to live the same type of lives as their ancestors. This all changed when the Knights attacked. The wandering band of nomads spelled the end of Terran life. They beat back the Victorian dragons, and in order to oppose this force, the dragons sought the aid of their southern neighbour. According to the Victorians, this was a peaceful process, the Terran king willingly giving up the power to the Victorians and taking on the title of King Gael. And so the nation of Tara would become part of Victoria, and the dragons would rule over Tara and Victoria as emperor. This, of course, is Victorian nonsense. As any good Terran knows, the Victorians began a violent occupation of the country, using the Knights as a convenient excuse. Even though the Gaelic kings maintained control over Tara, it was very much as a vassal of the Victorian dragons. But you might be wondering, Bionic, you Tara nationalist, why are the dragons opposing Tara? Well, I didn't mention it before because I forgot to, but the Dracos have always led Tara. During the formation of Victoria and Tara as we would know them, two dragon families would go their separate ways, forming the two countries in their own image. Eventually though, Dragonic rule would come to an end as a new bloodline desired Victoria. Along came the Lions. The Aslan decided that they were simply better than the Draco, and so decided they should rule Victoria. Unfortunately, there have only ever been two based Aslan in all of Tara's history, and neither of them were alive during this conquest. Suddenly finding themselves short of allies, the dragons took refuge in Tara, their final stronghold. As such, the mighty dragons took one last go at throwing these upstart cats out of their country, and were utterly defeated. Forced to surrender to the Aslan king, the last King Gael was killed by his own countrymen for giving up the fight. A tad extreme, perhaps, but a necessary show of commitment to the cause. During the reign of the Aslan, the dragons maintained their royalty in a dual monarchy system, although the Aslan always held the greater power. Due to the cultural differences and the intentional exploitation and oppression by the Victorian nobility, Tara became an underdeveloped region and suffered greatly from poverty. Resentment was brewing in the country, and this was decades before Dublin would come into the picture. See, this is all about them in the end, I just need to tell my story first. Following the destruction of Gaul, the Duke of Wellington would take control of the region. Although descended from Terrans, the Duke would do nothing to aid his subjects, intentionally turning a blind eye to the suffering of the people. This would be the lid that boiled the pot on Tara nationalism. Following the nobles' coup against the Aslan, Tara would become even more resentful against the Victorian occupiers, but luckily a new player was about to enter the scene. Now, several paragraphs into a video of Dublin propaganda, we arrive at the Dublin relevant parts. Before the coup against the Aslan, the last of the Draco royal line was supposedly killed. Unfortunately for the would-be assassins and their plans, two of the dragons survived. Enter stage the heroes of Tara, Ablana and Lochshini Dublin. The assassins had sought to wipe out the dragons, but Ablana's flame saved her and her younger sister. The Taran nationalist, the Earl of Warwick, brought the two girls under his protection following this. He sought to use the influence of the sisters to create a Tara in his image. Fortunately, he was not getting away with such wicked thoughts. His short-lived fantasies at rule would do nothing but harm Tara, and Eblana dispatched him once his usefulness ran out. Without a leader like the Earl of Warwick, none would be able to rally the Terrans. Eblana was planning on that though. After all, the dragon shall burn away all that oppose Tara. So, in the Terran year 1091, 7 years before the Victoria Crisis, Eblana would found Dublin, a group of freedom fighters who saw Terran independence from Victoria. They would relight the dying culture of Tara and see another King Gale sit upon the throne in a reformed Terran kingdom. Eblana would become the leader that would light the path towards Terran independence. She would appoint Loch Shiny as the shadow leader of Dublin to act as her body double and proxy leader in her stead. Eblana held no desire for taking over Victoria and would purely pursue Terran independence at all costs. In the beginning, Dublin only engaged in small-scale covert operations, targeted at destabilizing the region and weakening Victoria's grip. As such, Dublin would be called Spectre Force by the Victorians, unaware of the true scope and scale of the movement. Foolish Victorians, you have no idea what is in your future. All Victoria could do is tighten their grip around Tara in a vain attempt to stamp down on the Spectre Force. This would only push more Terrans into the arms of Dublin. Finally, the moment to reveal themselves came in what would be known as the County Hillock incident. Two of the good Victorians, Horn and Bagpipe, would be investigating the area due to Originium weapons being stolen. It was believed that the Spectre Force was the culprit behind the theft, but the Victorian soldiers present constantly interfered in their investigations. The local colonel had a deep-seated resentment of the Terran people. He would execute Terran suspects without even presenting evidence. Now, you might think this is me not sharing context, so for the record, this treatment is because the Terrans weren't rolling over to be oppressed. Obviously, the Victorians are in the wrong, and these extrajudicial murders will not go unpunished. It all comes to a head when the Victorians attempt to arrest Terrans simply trying to meet to discuss the ongoing Victorian oppression. Thankfully, before anything too bad can occur, a bomb is thrown into the Victorian troops. The Spectre Force, Dublin, had come to aid the Terrans trapped under Victorian oppression. It is only after Dublin has taken control of the region that Horn and Bagpipe discover the location of these Originium bombs. The Victorians won't allow Terrans freedom, and so they dirty bomb the entire city. So, in what I don't even need to exclude context for, Victorians attempt to commit an ethnic cleansing. Regardless, they don't succeed in wiping out Dublin. Aside from infecting the shadow leader of Dublin, they mostly just kill a bunch of civilians. The other leaders present within County Hillock weren't even killed by them. It was one of Rhodes Island's elite operators that took them down. Dublin does take revenge for the fallen though, and slaughter the Victorians responsible for the bombing. Eblana, although not present for the vast majority of the situation, makes sure no tragedy goes to waste by broadcasting what Victoria had done to the rest of the world. From here, Eblana would acquire the final piece of the puzzle needed to overthrow Victorian oppression. She would secure the support of the ruling Duke of Tara, the Duke of Wellington. With his backing, Dublin was no longer a rogue force, but a proper military power. Loch Shiny, now Rhodes Island operator Reed, would also return to Tara around this point. Having recovered from her injuries during the County Hillock incident, she begins travelling with Taran refugees and defends them from attacks by Victorian forces. This continues mostly peacefully until one night the Victorians attack her camp in an attempt to assassinate one of the leaders of Dublin. Luckily for everyone involved, the noble brigadier who was definitely not there to kill Reed was close by and rushed to her aid. Reed unleashes her flames and drives the two forces apart, protecting most of her companions from the violence, but some still die in the attempt. She even manages to get herself into a situationship with Bagpipe. How is it relevant to Dublin propaganda? It isn't. I am just required to mention such things. Bagpipe of course blames Dublin for the events of County Hillock, but Reed simply states that the Terrans should be free to pursue their freedom. Another Victoria cell owned by a true Terran Chad. Following her travels alongside these refugees, Reed would form her own pacifist Dublin, one that would still follow the same goal as the original Dublin, but in her own more peaceful means. Reed and her sister Eblana would both head for the heart of Victoria, Londinium, to put a stop to the crisis there. From here on, and only here on, would Dublin enter the Victoria crisis. Mandragora, allying with the Sorcas, my friend, you have been listening to too much Victorian propaganda. A noble Taran would never ally with those devils who oppress innocent civilians. No, Dublin would join the ducal alliance that would besiege Londinium, aiding their Victorian oppressors to strike down a greater foe. By the time they were in position, the Sorcas superweapon the Shard would be active. This allowed them to effortlessly destroy warships. When the Norport Borough was being used as a human shield by the Sorcas, it was only the Dukes Windermere and Wellington that would risk sending aid. Windermere evacuated civilians, while Ablana herself would confront one of the leaders of the Sorkaz, the Damasti cluster. This fight would end with Ablana's victory, although as an unintended side effect, her flames began consuming Norport. Luckily for all involved, the civilians were safely evacuated onto Windermere ship. Absolutely no one was left behind. Yup. No civilian casualties were caused by our glorious leader, except against the Sorkaz, of course. Following the events of Norport, the Victoria crisis would escalate to all-out war. Being the most competent commander, Wellington would take command of the ducal forces and march into battle against the Sorkaz. Ablana would take some time to herself, as our glorious leader is wont to do, and confront an infected terrorist from Ursus. Tallulah refuses to join the Terran cause, so Ablana and her are forced to come to blows. During the main battle between Victoria and the Sorkaz, Ablana would burn away at the Sorkaz lines. All the while, Wellington would personally lead the assault on Nes Salem, leaving the Victorian forces exposed in order to claim glory, resulting in the loss of more Victorian lives? Nonsense. The simplest way to end the war was to cut off the head of the enemy, although it proved to be a task beyond even the Iron Duke. Fortunately, before the Sorkaz completely blanketed the battlefield in Originium, Siege, the last of the Aslan royal line, used the Size of Kings to push back the encroaching storm. This saved the Ducal Alliance long enough for Rhodes Island to put a stop to the Sorkaz superweapon. No longer backed by their mighty war machine, the Sorkaz retreated within Londinium. The siege against Londinium was held by the Dukes due to their desire to preserve their remaining strength. All the while the people within suffered. Such a situation was not acceptable for Loch Shinny, so she travelled through the battlefield, aiding Sorkaz and Victorian alike until she came to the Gastrel, the Duke of Wellington's flagship. While aboard the ship, she would order the Duke to take the forces of Tara and smash through the Sorkaz to liberate Londinium, once again showing the noble might of Tara to the whole world. With her sister Ablana once again leaping headfirst into danger against Nes Salem. Following the noble actions of Dublin, Ablana would declare Taran independence and return back to the capital of Tara, Narsirshi, so that she may begin her rule over Tara. And here, within the walls of Narsirshi, would the story of Dublin end. Their purpose served, the freedom fighters would integrate into the Taran military under Wellington and would serve Tara under the one and only Red Dragon, Loch Shinny Dublin. Now, if you truly believe that there were actually two Red Dragons before this point, you have been deceived. For one is the reflection of the other, a mask worn to hide themselves from Victoria. Ablana was simply put a wartime leader, one who would lead Tara through the turbulent times and emerge from the crucible torn and worn. The very flames that burnt back oppression turned on those they saved. Only in death was that flame returned to her and Loch Shinny could rise from the ashes to lead Tara into the future. One free from hate, one free from tyranny, and one free from Victoria. Or so the legend of the two Red Dragons goes. The truth is hidden between the lines. Did Ablana purge the radical members of Dublin in extrajudicial killings? Did she plan to burn the capital to the ground to remove that which the Victorians could point to and blame? Did Loch Shinny fake the death of her own sister to claim power? All of these things are highly unlikely, and would reflect poorly on the noble organisation that won Tara her freedom. But maybe you can find the answers to your questions on a landship run by a suspiciously well-armed medical company. Although I wouldn't count on it. If you would like to hear about the legend of the two Red Dragons, there is a video by a super cool Tara nationalist on this channel about it. And that is Dublin. Those who do nothing wrong. And if they maybe did, it was pure Victorian propaganda. If you believe otherwise, perhaps you should head to the dark woods surrounding our capital for some clarifications on the truth of these lies. Dublin was a noble group who fought for their beliefs and won back the freedom of their homeland with blood, sweat, and tears. And now, with a Red Dragon at their head, Tara can move into the future in a world that is step past the Victorian Empire. A warm thank you to the members of the factory. You are the innocent Taran civilians being dirty bombed by Victoria so that I may commit a little bit of what's called international diplomacy. You are all truly wonderful, and I will see you in the next one. Y'all be good people. If I see one person in the comments respecting Victoria, you're getting banned. You're getting banned, and I'm pinning you and I'm telling everyone to bully you for your bad opinions because you're bad.